and Demanding Children's Rights, MDCR Technical Working Group. So we warmly welcome you to the fifth Monitoring and Demanding Children's Rights Community of Practice webinar on child rights reporting on climate change and the environment. So for participants who have just joined us now, the MDCR Community of Practice is a platform for strengthening the technical knowledge and understanding and capacity of child rights governance practitioners and other thematic staff on how to engage in monitoring and demanding children's rights, uh, and to share good practices in child rights programming. So, but before we start this webinar, maybe I could just turn off my camera to save bandwidth. Okay. We just have some housekeeping rules that we would like to bring to your attention. So the webinar is being recorded and we will share the recording with all of you afterwards, together with all the related documentation, such as the PowerPoint presentation, the relevant examples, the links, and contact details shared during the discussion. There is no live interpretation available. However, we tried to find ways on how to address the language barriers, especially for the non-English speaking participants who are joining us today. So I think in the second slide, there are several options which we can do. Um, okay, so before, yeah, I'll say this first, Laura. So we can translate the slides. So as you can see in the screen, in the lower part of the screen, just below the slides that you see, there are three, what do you call that? The three dots there. You can click that. And then when you click that, it would show you translate slides, and you can choose the language that you want the slides to be translated to. Okay. Our next option, I think it's in the next slide. There's also, yeah, you can also add live captions. So if you look at if this, interface is seen in your screen as well in your MS Teams, in the upper part of your screen, there are also three dots, which says more. You can click that, and then it will show you options, and you can turn on live captions. And then you can also look at the three dots below the screen and choose the language that you want the captions to be translated. Okay. So another option is actually we will try our best to share some the bullet points on the highlights or summarizing the inputs and in the discussions in Spanish, in French, in English, in the chat box to help everyone follow the webinar. There's also an option to share this recording in YouTube afterwards, where there's an option also which you can use to change the language transcriptions, I think. But do let us know if you're comfortable with this as well. Okay. So now we've done that. For child safeguarding reminders, please be aware that we will be having child participants in this webinar. So we are all responsible for making sure that everyone, including the children, uh, feel safe and happy engaged in this webinar. Here are a few rules that we should keep in mind at all times. I think my colleagues will also put in the chat box the code of conduct so that you can read through it and commit to upholding the reminders there. But just a summary, please treat others with respect during the webinar, and please use non-technical language as much as possible. Concerning child safeguarding, I will be the child safeguarding focal person today. So if any issues, concerns arise, please do not hesitate to contact me at melanie.yana@savethechildren.org, but I will also put my email in the chat box later on. So please feel free to ask questions as the webinar unfolds. For that, we encourage you to please use the chat box and make sure that you briefly introduce yourself and write who you intend your questions to be given to. So just to say that we're also opening the communities of practice webinars to civil society partners. And therefore, we want to give an extra welcome to partners of the SIDA Civil Society CSO program that have joined us today. So just a brief run through of what to expect in the next 1.5 hours. I think it's in the next slide. So for session one, okay, we will be having an introduction on the reporting cycle and the status of the reporting follow-up on climate change and the environment, of which Laura Abado, our thematic advisor for child rights and climate and environment, will be facilitating the session. For session number two, we will also have a discussion on the follow-up on reporting on climate change and the environment, which will be moderated by Teresa Amorim, the Regional Child Rights and Governance Advisor. And we are also happy to be joined today by a child from Albania who will share about their child right report on climate change and the environment, which they submitted to the CRC committee. Also, a colleague from Ivory Coast who will be reporting on climate change and the environment under the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. There's also sharing on climate change and in the environment and reporting to the UPR, but I think that will be shared through some links. Then there will be session 3 on follow-up on climate change and the environment recommendations in relation to UPR and CRC, which will be shared by our colleagues from Zambia and the Philippines. And then we'll have some updates on the UNCRC general comment on children's rights and the environment with a special focus on climate change towards the end of the webinar, and then our closing remarks. Okay, so our moderator for today's webinar will be Laura, and I'm turning over the floor to her.
Hi, everyone. I also will close my camera soon just to say hello. And also, it's new to us, but you know, this caption thing, like if you want to have translation on the screen, I put as main language, spoken language, English. Please don't change that, because if you change that, then the translations to other languages will not work. So the spoken language is the language I'm speaking now. So we will only change when our colleagues from Ivory Coast will speak French. So I can change that. So please don't touch the spoken language. However, you can choose on the bottom right side of your screen, the 3 dots, you can change just the subtitles. So the subtitles, you can make them in Arabic, in French, in Portuguese, in any language you like, but please don't change the spoken language. Otherwise, it will disturb, I think, for everyone to understand what is being said. Thank you for that, and thank you so much, Mane. So I wanted to. I'm very excited about this webinar, and I prepared with Teresa and Karen and other colleagues. The whole idea is to really get us because of the fact that there's so many impacts of environment and climate change on children. And we're getting more aware of that. We speak about it much more. Then there's also some opportunities to do something about it through the work we do. Here in this call, we have people who are more experts on environment and people who are more expert on children's rights. So you will hear a bit of both, because we want the two communities to work more together. But you will see the idea. I will start with a bit more on environment, and then I will go a bit more on the child rights and child rights reporting, and then we'll see what we can do together. So just keep that in mind, and thank you for your patience, so you understand where we're coming from and where we're going. So just a word about why does the environment matter to children? So the whole idea here is that the fact that children are impacted by environment degradation, including climate change, is not new, you know. However, their impact, like a safe, clean, and healthy environment, enables children to live, survive, and develop. Environmental risks pose a major threat to children, and I will say a bit more about that in a minute. And children are disproportionately affected by environmental harm, and that is what I'm gonna speak more about. So environmental risks and impacts to children, we can speak about major environmental risks, which is, for example, air pollution, water contamination, scarcity, soil degradation, loss of biological diversity and ecosystems, hazardous chemicals, toxic substances and waste, etc. Growing greenhouse gas emissions, that's what we speak mostly about when it comes to climate change. This list is showing you as well that we have also human-induced climate change, extreme weather events, etc. Just to say this, not only about climate change, there's also other environmental risks to children's rights, which are listed here, and it's good to be aware of that. Of the 5.9 million deaths of children under 5 each year, there's an estimate 26% attributed to the environment. So air pollution alone kills 570,000 children under 5 every year. And the WHO estimates that 12 million children in developing countries suffer permanent brain damage due to lead poisoning, for example. Just to give you an idea of the severity of the issue, 85 million children are forced to work in hazardous conditions, which includes unhealthy environments. And if we go more looking at how environmental hazards affect children disproportionately, we look at two things. We say the vulnerability based on the individual context of the child, but also at the level of exposure. So the exposure to environmental health risk is unequally distributed between countries, with a higher burden in low and medium income countries. And you can see these factors that are on the slide relate to the age. We mentioned some figures for children under 5, but also gender aspects, where you live, the ethnicity, your ability to move, etc. So there's a lot of aspects that contribute to the vulnerability and the disproportionate impact on children. And it's a changing vulnerability depending on the context. And just looking at some figures from the latest reports that Save the Children has released, also looking at the level of exposure when if a child is born, we estimate that a child born 2020 would experience this many more extreme events during their lifetime compared to a person born in 1960. And you see all these heat waves, river floods, crop failure, drought, wildfires, how much times more risks to live through that. So the climate change exacerbates inequality, and it's estimated that 1 billion children live in countries at extreme risks of climate change. So here we see the impacts on children, but it's a child rights issue. It's not just about vulnerability, it's a rights issue. And there are many here. I'm not going to go through the details of the slides, but just to show you that actually there are legal and political commitments and obligations. Some of them on the left side relate to human rights, and some of them in the middle relate to the Sustainable Development Goals, and some of them relate to environmental treaties and policies. All of them are relevant, and the whole idea here and why we're mentioning them today is to show you that what we're trying to do as we go more and more, when we talk about these environmental climate impacts from a human rights-based approach, is to try to make the link between these commitments. It's the same states who have to deliver on all these, and children don't live in silos in this and this treaty. They live a situation, and we need to make sure that states take the responsibilities to protect them. So now the topic of today. Today's session, we will focus on how civil society can advance children's rights to a healthy environment using the UN and regional human rights reporting, monitoring, and follow-up processes. What we call in Save the Children, the Child Rights Reporting Common Approach. So what does that refer to? This refers to how we, as civil society, and how children themselves can submit information or reports to UN and regional human rights bodies, such as the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, or for example, the African Committee on the Rights of the Child, on environmental and climate change impacts on children's rights. But also, we also want to look at how can we effectively make use of recommendations that results from these reporting procedures and make use of them at country level. So you may be wondering, what am I talking about? What human rights bodies we're talking about, and what reporting opportunities? As you can see in this slide, states have to report on regular intervals to something called monitoring and review processes. They can be treaty bodies. It means it's entities who monitor how treaties are implemented. And it could be charter bodies, and it doesn't matter so much for today, but just so you know the terminology, which is, for example, this is the bodies or the entities who are born from the Charter of the UN, for example. And here we're talking about human rights treaty bodies. Here on the left, you can see we talk often of the UN Convention and UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, but there's 8 other human rights treaties. And many of them are relevant for environmental and climate issues because they relate to health, education, etc. It's every 5 years that states report to these bodies. Then on the African continent, it's the only continent that has an own convention on children's rights. That's why we work on it a lot. And we'll hear from the colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire on their experience reporting to the Committee of African Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. It's every 3 years that states have to report. And in the middle, you will have this Human Rights Council procedure, which is called the Universal Periodic Review Procedure, UPR. And that's every 4.5 to 5 years. It's a peer review. That's the only one that is really state-to-state review, and they give recommendations to each other. There's other monitoring procedures that I just mentioned here, but not going in detail. The whole point is that civil society and children can bring information that is complementary to what the state will send. And that's where the whole idea is, like, if we or the state don't bring any issues relating to environment or climate change impact on children, then it's less likely that at the end of these review processes, there will be recommendations or so-called concluding observations that will include recommendations to state on what they should do on climate and environment. So this is really the core of why we have this session, and I just wanted to highlight this so that you understand a bit, for those of you for whom it's new, that the whole reporting engagement results in recommendations. And there are some examples that our colleagues have been engaging with. We have colleagues from Canada, their report related to clean water, for example, but there's different topics that we can engage on. We can bring in reports. And these are just examples, and we will hear more from colleagues later. They can be about health, about education, about protection. And if we look at this SAVE, for those who are not from SAVE, very heavy slide here, but you can see it relates to the 4 goals of that SAVE strategy has. So we can report on these issues that are in these goals as far as they relate to environment and climate change, and even more, depending on the context. So the whole logic is very much like bringing information from local to global. We have developed some tools and case studies that can help in bringing this information up and know what to bring, for example, what to ask the children, what to ask the civil society, so that we know what is it that we want to inform these review mechanisms, these monitoring and review procedures. And the whole idea is that often we stand there. However, we need to use these recommendations. So back to local, bring those recommendations, use them as tools in our work to ensure quality of programming, quality of our advocacy, of strategic planning, etc. And that's the logic. And there's also a tool which is part of the How to Child Rights series that we can say more about one day to you. But just so you know, there are some tools who can help you in this work. So I just want to turn everybody to Mentimeter and call Rodina in so that she can guide you through. Rodina has prepared, if you go to menti.com, you insert this code, 3445, I don't know if Rodina, you are here, 1187. Yes.
Yes, Laura, I'm here.
Thank you, Rodina. Over. So in order to know who's in the room and what's the and the level of experience, just we have this question for you. So Rodina, let us know when you. Yeah. So the first question. This is on the second question, Rodina. I think I see follow up.
Yes. So
yes,
people
this
have
one.
started.
The first question. Yes. Yeah. Great. So yes, please go on this link, menti.com, and put the code 344-51187, as you see in the top of the slides. And then we want to know if you have reported on climate change and environment to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, or to the UPR, Universal Periodic Review, or to the African Committee, or if you have not reported at all, just to know also the level of experience so that we also know how much more information we can provide in the minutes that are remaining. If there are any issues, please put in the chat box so we know, or unmute so we know. And yeah, as Melanie is writing that if you cannot access the Mentimeter, feel free to type in the chat box if you have any experience in reporting on climate change and environment. So we have 12 persons that have never reported to climate change on climate change and environment. We have one person who said that you have reported to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, and one person who said that you reported to other treaty bodies. Nobody has written Universal Periodic Review at this point. And nobody has written, I think, about the African Charter, but we know that our colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire, for example, have that. Could we go to the next question? You can continue filling in. We can check the results later on, just so that we save some time, because I see already time is running too fast. So on the question on follow-up to recommendations, two of you have said that I don't know if my state got any recommendations. And some of you said I use them in my work, or I do not use them in my work. You can have multiple choice answers, just so you know. You can say, for example, I don't use them and I don't know if my state got any, for example. But that's great. Please continue filling in even after, and thank you so much. So it seems that maybe some of the suggestions we have today will be useful to you, because we're planning to give you some links where you can find, for example, reporting opportunities, as well as how to find recommendations for your state. So I'm going to pass the floor to my colleague Teresa now, and Teresa will take you through some reporting opportunity on the reporting part. And over to you, Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, dear colleagues and partners, in this part of the webinar, we will listen to colleagues who have reported to the UNCRC, to the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and to the UPR, Universal Periodic Review, on how climate change and environment degradation has affected children. And as you can see in the slide, we will speak about, maybe you can go to the next slide. We'll speak about the left side of the slide related to reporting, basically. And we're going to start. So here we are, exactly. We are on the left side, actually. And we will listen to a first experience from Albania. We will now be giving the floor to a child. I'm sorry, I don't know her name exactly, but if one colleague can then introduce her, I will be grateful. And she's from a child-led group in Albania. And when it was the time to prepare a complementary report on the implementation of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child in Albania, she decided to prepare a child-led report focusing exclusively on climate change and the environment. So we would like very much that you tell us more how you did it, and how did you go about preparing the report. So please, the floor is yours.
Teresa, our guest for today is Agim Grini from Albania. So he's 17 years old. So Agim, I would like to give the floor to you.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I had a technical problem.
We hear you very well.
Okay,
Welcome.
thank you for having me. First of all, my name is Agim. I'm a member of Voice 16 Plus for 6 years now, and Voice 16 Plus is a group supported by Save the Children for 20 years. We have experience in reporting at national level as well as the international levels. Albania, for the first time, submitted a report which was 100% focused on climate change issues. Starting from 2011, from the information I have from my ancestors in the group, because our group is a fluid group that has many children participating, taking part, reporting, and being child advocates for many years in advance. Albania and Voice 16 Plus has 2 experiences in the UPR and 1 experience in UNCRC. Because we have also focused on other issues such as bullying, children's rights, details, etc. Regarding the climate change report, it should be noted that our group went with this report since it was something new. Even though we had some data from, because we associated it with children's rights report since 2020, the group is part of a project Children Stand Up, that focuses on climate change through the project, and we secured some data which we used to write the project, parallel project that helped us draw and make the study. The study was about the impact of climate change on children's health. And as I said, we use the data to the Geneva report that we use for UNCRC. Normally, the group has made many workshops towards identifying the issues that we have to use for our report. From many issues that we identified, we chose and prioritized the most important and immediate issues that we thought that were the most important ones to identify. We have also enriched it with our recommendations from maybe solutions to give answer to some problems that we identified in our country. We gave recommendations to for every task and bullet point of our issues, we gave a recommendation and a solution that the government could use to implement and change that issue. As I said, we have also enriched it with our recommendations. Then came the moment of reporting to Geneva. We went there. We were selected by a transparent choosing, how can I say? Children were all sure that me and my friend Elsa were the ones that should represent them in Geneva, according to our experiences, our activity in the group, our I don't know, I can say skills or something else, but and the moment of reporting, when we went to Geneva, we were sat at the table with the committee, and they heard us very well. They listened to all of the problems, the report that we showed them, and we presented to the Albanian task group that was exactly for us. And then when we returned to Albania, we didn't stop. We returned to Albania, continuing our advocacy plan by meeting with deputies, with ministers, and diplomatic missions that play a role in encouraging the state to implement the recommendations that we have made. As I mentioned, all these meetings were successfully done, and they heard us very well. Our voice was 100% transmitted to them, and now we hope that everything's going to be at our rights.
Thank you very much. Really, really impressive. Thank you so much. I'm now turning to our colleagues from Ivory Coast. So please note that our colleagues are going to speak in French, and so you can use the translation application on your Teams to hear what they will say. And please, Iriasu, the floor is yours. He will be sharing his experience reporting climate change and environment protection on within the African Charter mechanism. Please.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much, Teresa. As Teresa said, my presentation will be in French. Ok, je vais partager mon écran.
Irasu, j'ai les présentations, j'ai les slides.
Ah, tu as déjà présenté? Ok,
c'est
d'accord,
bon?
merci
Oui,
beaucoup.
d'accord,
Oui, c'est
de
bon, c'est
rien.
bon. J'avais pas fait attention. Ok, alors merci beaucoup. Je suis Iriasu Koulibaly, chef de projet SIDA-CSO pour le bureau pays Save Children en Côte d'Ivoire. Alors, je suis avec un collègue, un membre de l'équipe, Ange Kofi. Il est officier CSJ, gouvernance pour les droits de l'enfant sur le programme. Alors, on va partager avec vous notre expérience de travail sur la question environnementale dans le cadre du processus de suivi des droits de l'enfant. On veut vraiment dire merci pour cette opportunité qui nous a offerte et dire qu'on revient du Lesotho. On y était la semaine dernière pour présenter le rapport de la société civile sur la mise en œuvre de la Charte africaine des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant en Côte d'Ivoire. Voilà. On y est allé avec également un représentant des organisations d'enfants pour également soutenir un rapport spécifique aux enfants relatif à la mise en œuvre de cette charte en Côte d'Ivoire. Alors, dans le processus, il faut dire que c'est un processus qu'on a démarré depuis l'année dernière et on a eu la chance et l'opportunité, grâce à Laure et à Teresa qui nous ont soutenus, nous et nos partenaires sur ce processus-là. Donc, on a eu la chance, comme je le disais tantôt, de scruter l'aspect environnemental, notamment avec l'utilisation de l'outil série qui, comme vous le savez, était initialement développé pour travailler sur la Convention des Nations Unies relative aux droits de l'enfant, CDE. Donc, on a dû faire un travail d'adaptation pour le processus de la charte africaine et ça a été un succès. Slide prochain. On va vous présenter comment on y est allé avec nos partenaires et comment est-ce qu'on pense que cela peut être utilisé dans le cadre de cet autre processus-là. Slide prochain. OK. Alors, et donc, comme je le disais tantôt, le contexte, c'est qu'on devait, on devait accompagner dans le cadre du programme SIDA-CSO qu'on a au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, programme soutenu par le gouvernement suédois. On devait accompagner nos partenaires de la société civile au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire pour développer et présenter le rapport complémentaire relatif à la mise en œuvre de la Charte africaine des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant en Côte d'Ivoire. Et donc, on est allé dans une optique de développer deux rapports. Il y a eu deux rapports. Le tout premier rapport a été développé par la société civile sous le lead d'une organisation qu'on appelle le Forum des ONG en Côte d'Ivoire, qui est, si on veut, une fêtière d'une cinquantaine d'organisations qui travaillent sur les questions de droits de l'enfant en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, il y a eu un tout premier rapport développé par la société civile sous le lead du forum. Et il y a eu un second rapport parce qu'on a voulu aussi donner la possibilité dans ce processus-là aux organisations d'enfants, aux groupes d'enfants, de véritablement conduire un processus, je vais dire, parallèle pour donner leur avis sur la mise en œuvre de la Charte africaine au niveau de Charte africaine des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, il y a eu un deuxième rapport développé par les enfants sous le lead d'une organisation d'enfants qu'on a en Côte d'Ivoire qu'on appelle l'AEJT, l'Association des enfants et des jeunes travailleurs. Et donc, ces deux rapports ont été présentés, comme je le disais la semaine dernière, au Lesotho devant le Comité africain des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant. On peut continuer avec la slide. Et ils nous ont permis d'introduire pour la toute première fois la question de l'environnement dans les recommandations auprès du Comité africain des experts des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant. Alors, il faut retenir pour la petite histoire que dans les processus précédents, on n'a jamais eu de recommandations pour le gouvernement ivoirien sur les questions environnementales et du changement climatique. Et donc, avec la société civile, on avait voulu vraiment que ce comité-là puisse adresser des recommandations ayant trait aux questions environnementales, aux questions du changement climatique, parce que c'est des questions également qui préoccupent la question des droits de l'enfant au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, il nous fallait, pour soutenir ça, utiliser des outils tels que l'outil série qui nous ont été mis à disposition. Alors, donc, on a sur certains éléments, ça a été ça le travail d'intégration, le travail d'adaptation. Sur certains éléments, notamment au niveau de la santé, nous avons, avec la société civile, avec les organisations d'enfants, fait par exemple référence à l'article 14 de la Charte africaine des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant. Et à ce sujet-là, le constat a été qu'il y avait un impact sur... On allait très vite, désolé. On peut juste revenir en arrière.
Désolée,
Okay, alors,
Irasso, il y a un problème avec
non, c'est pas grave.
Juste un instant, je vais juste essayer de revenir. Il y a quelqu'un qui a pris le contrôle des slides.
Okay.
Je vais juste essayer de bouger. Sorry, everybody. I'm just trying to move the slides back.
Okay.
Just a moment. I don't know why I can't see them anymore. Let me just reshare. Un instant. Je vais juste partager encore une fois. Top.
OK.
Here.
Il n'y a pas de problème. C'est compliqué. Je peux quand même continuer parce que j'ai l'élément.
Oui,
ici.
continuez. Et je vais juste montrer. Je suis là tout de suite. Là. Voilà, on est là.
OK. Alors, d'accord.
Voilà.
OK. Alors, merci beaucoup. Alors, je suis en train de dire que dans un souci de parfaitement intégrer, on a, par exemple, regardé l'article 14 de la Charte qui met en relief des questions liées à la santé et à la mortalité infantile due à la pollution atmosphérique imputable à la mauvaise gestion des ordures ménagères. Donc, on comprend qu'il y a là un fort lien entre droit de l'enfant, droit à la santé, droit des personnes, environnement et tout ce qu'il y a avec. Donc, on a regardé ça. On a également, en ce qui concerne la liberté d'expression et la liberté d'association, on a fait référence aux articles 7 et 8 de la Charte qui concernent les droits des enfants de s'exprimer, de s'informer librement dans tous les domaines et la liberté d'association et de rassemblement pacifique conformément à la loi. Et donc, le constat était que les organisations d'enfants en Côte d'Ivoire ne sont pas actives dans le domaine de l'environnement. C'est bon? Donc, on peut tout de suite conclure qu'il y a à ce niveau-là une forte ou bien pratiquement une existence d'action à la matière. On a également au niveau de l'éducation regardé l'article 11 de la Charte qui concerne la promotion et le développement de la personnalité de l'enfant et qui aussi situe sa responsabilité, ses talents et ses capacités mentales et physiques. Donc, à ce propos, ce qu'on a fait, c'est qu'on a observé l'insuffisance et l'inexistence d'informations adaptées aux enfants sur le sujet, aussi bien dans le cursus scolaire que dans les ménages que dans les médias publics. Alors, tous ces éléments montrent tout de suite comment est-ce que nous avons, avec l'outil série, analysé, accompagné les organisations d'enfants et la société civile à analyser les questions des droits de l'enfant de façon transversale en tenant compte de la composante environnementale et comment est-ce que, à partir des insuffisances et des constats opérés, des recommandations ont pu être formulées à l'endroit du comité. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on a appris de tout ce processus? Quelles sont les leçons qu'on voudrait partager? Alors, l'une des choses qu'on a appréciées avec l'ensemble des acteurs, y compris les enfants qui ont travaillé sur ce reportage ici au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, c'est la simplicité et la clarté du guide série qui situe la nature des risques environnementaux assujettissant les droits de l'enfant. Voilà, l'outil était vraiment très simple. On veut aussi dire merci au passage parce que au début du processus, on a organisé une session en ligne au cours de laquelle Laure et Teresa nous ont induit, nous et nos partenaires, sur cet outil-là. Et ça nous a permis de bien comprendre l'outil avec les partenaires et de l'utiliser de façon efficiente. Ensuite, le comité africain des experts du bien-être de l'enfant n'avait jamais fait par le passé de recommandations à l'État de Côte d'Ivoire en matière d'environnement, de changement climatique. Donc, ça a été très intéressant pour nous de pouvoir utiliser ce processus, cet outil-là pour intégrer la question. Et pour la petite histoire, moi, j'étais au Lesotho avec la société civile dans la salle et le président de du comité a posé une question justement sur l'outil Siri. C'était innovant, c'était quelque chose dont il n'avait jamais entendu parler selon ses propres mots. Il a voulu en savoir plus et il a posé la question. Et la secrétaire exécutive du Forum des ONG lui a expliqué c'était quoi cet outil, sur à quoi ça servait et tout ça. Donc, ça veut dire que c'est quelque chose qui a été absolument apprécié. Ensuite, les enfants se sont très facilement approprié la question environnementale et ont consacré une section entière dans leur rapport. Si on a l'opportunité de vous partager notre rapport, en tout cas celui des enfants, vous verrez qu'il y a vraiment un chapitre là-dessus qui met en relief les questions environnementales qui menacent les droits de l'enfant dans le contexte de la Côte d'Ivoire. Il y a des recommandations qui vont avec, dont l'un est par exemple le fait que les enfants demandent au gouvernement d'intégrer des questions environnementales et des questions liées aux droits de l'enfant dans ce qu'on appelle en Côte d'Ivoire l'éthique d'impact environnemental et social des entreprises. Donc, c'est vraiment dit que le fait qu'on ait intégré cette notion-là dans notre processus de rapportage, le fait qu'on ait pu disposer d'un outil comme l'outil Siri nous a vraiment accompagnés et appuyés dans ce processus. Alors, je vais m'arrêter là tout en disant merci et dire qu'on est disposé à répondre à des questions si vous en avez. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Iriassou, et merci à l'équipe de Côte d'Ivoire de nous avoir exposé votre expérience. Dear colleagues and partners, we now heard examples of reporting on climate change and environment impact on children to the UN Committee of the Rights of the Child and the African Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. However, it is really important to remember that there are other human rights mechanisms and that you can report to on how climate change and the environment are affecting children. For example, the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights is relevant because for the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, your state will report on health, water, education, which are all impacted by climate change and environmental degradation. We have also experiences reporting on climate change and environment using the UPR, the Universal Periodic Procedure, which is a state-to-state review of all human rights records. We will share in the chat box a link to a case study and a video prepared by our colleagues in Australia that you could check out at a later stage. Also, when reporting, we can refer to and get inspiration from the UN resolutions such as the HRC resolution 45/30 on realizing children's rights through a healthy environment. When we'll put in the chat link to a guidance, how you can use it and get some ideas. So please, if it is too much for this scope, for this community of practice, we can also feel free to take, we can also feel free eventually to discuss about at a later stage. So now, please, we have, I think, more or less 10 minutes for an open forum and questions from participants and others' experiences to share. So please, if there is anybody that wants to ask questions or share their experience, this is, you can do it now. We have more or less 10 minutes. No questions? You can eventually, I don't know, maybe we can go through the chat box if there is already any question or reaction based on the presentations. Yeah, please.
Yes, Teresa, I think Inda, would you like to unmute Inda to ask your question?
Hello. Hello, good evening from Manila. I'm Inda from Child Rights Coalition Asia. I would like to thank our young speakers for sharing their experience. May I know what is the age of your youngest participant in the development of your reports, be it to UNCRC or UPR or ACR or the African Charter? Or, have you noticed any difference in terms of the views shared by younger children, those below 18 years old, to the views shared by young adults, 18 and above?
Okay, thanks so much. Maybe I can translate this question to our colleagues
Oh, thank you, please. Sorry.
Ivory Coast, because I think Iriasu, la question, c'est de savoir si vous avez, par exemple, comme vous avez aussi cette expérience avec la société civile et les enfants tout récemment, c'est de savoir si vous avez noté des différences de point de vue parmi les moins de 18 ans et ceux qui sont un peu plus âgés, les jeunes en fait. Est-ce que vous avez pu percevoir des différences de recommandations ou d'opinions entre ces deux tranches d'âge?
Ok, alors, merci beaucoup. Sans avoir participé à tous les focus groups qui ont été réalisés dans toutes les zones, parce qu'il y avait énormément de choses à faire en peu de temps. Alors, ce qui s'est passé, comme on l'a dit, il y a eu deux processus parallèles. Il y a eu un processus pour les adultes conduit par le Forum des ONG. Et avec les adultes, ça a été des focus groups, des ateliers avec des questions beaucoup plus spécifiques, avec des exemples beaucoup plus spécifiques, avec des recherches dans les rapports d'études et tout ça. Et avec les enfants, il y a eu des focus groups également, il y a eu énormément de consultations. Et il faut dire que les enfants qui ont été impliqués dans ce processus au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire avaient entre 10 et 17 ans. Et il y a eu des focus groups avec des diffusions tenant compte des tranches d'âge. Par exemple, les enfants de 10 à 12, 13 ans ensemble, ceux de 14, 17 ans ensemble. Alors, les enfants ont été plus dans leur évaluation, dans les constats qu'ils ont faits, ont été plus portés sur des constats factuels. C'est-à-dire, ils constatent, par exemple, que dans leur lieu d'habitation, dans leurs environnements, les ordures ménagères ne sont pas régulièrement enlevées et que cela peut, selon ce qu'ils savent en termes de questions sur la santé, cela peut avoir des impacts sur la santé. Ils ont par exemple donné des exemples. Tiens, ça fait que moi, par exemple, dans mon école, régulièrement, des enfants souffrent de palud ou bien des enfants souffrent de toutes les infections qui peuvent être liées à santé ou bien aux problèmes d'hygiène dans leur environnement. Donc, ces constats-là étaient beaucoup plus factuels. Et vous verrez, si on vous partage le rapport des enfants, que vous n'allez pas voir dedans des éléments faisant référence à des rapports d'études ou bien à des évaluations menées par des experts ou par toute autre entité en Côte d'Ivoire sur ces questions-là. Mais vous allez plutôt voir, OK, constat, ou bien ce qu'on n'aime pas. On a constaté que nos villes sont trop sales ou nos rues sont trop sales, ce qui peut avoir des conséquences sur la santé de nos amis. Ce qu'on veut, c'est que les ordures, le gouvernement doit prendre ses dispositions pour régulièrement enlever les ordures et tout ça. Et donc, voilà, ça a été deux approches. Une approche avec les adultes qui était beaucoup plus, on va dire, technique, beaucoup plus basée sur des évidences, sur des études, des rapports, etc. Une approche avec des enfants où on s'est assuré, à un premier niveau, qu'ils aient une bonne compréhension des outils. Donc, les personnes qui étaient en charge de soutenir les enfants ont bien compris les outils, ont essayé d'expliquer ces outils-là avec un langage adapté. Des focus groups adaptés également ont été organisés et les enfants ont été libres de dire tout ce qu'ils constataient ou tout ce qu'ils n'aimaient pas sur la base de ces constats sans qu'on leur demande de le prouver avec des rapports d'études, avec des... Voilà. Et c'est de cette même façon que le rapport, parce que quand on allait au Lesotho, il y a aussi eu 5 minutes pour que le représentant d'enfants fasse le résumé, présente l'essence de leur rapport au comité. Et c'est de cette même façon que ça a été présenté. Et je vous avoue, bon, le comité a été très touché par la façon dont les enfants ont présenté le rapport. C'est quelque chose que le comité a vraiment apprécié et a salué. Voilà. Donc, j'espère que j'ai pu répondre efficacement à la question, mais c'est vraiment de cette sorte-là qu'on a pu avancer avec l'implication des enfants dans ce processus. Merci.
Thank you so much, Iriasu. We can feel the passion about it. Huh? I'm going to maybe Ajim. You can also provide share with us your experience around this aspect. I think you probably have also useful experiences to share along on that question that Inda just asked. Ajim, can you hear us? I'm not sure if he's still connected. I don't see in the screen, so it seems that he's no more with us. Okay. Okay, any other questions or sharing experiences that you would like to do, or we pass to the next, the last part of the webinar? Okay, I see a hand. Dominique, please, the floor is yours. Dominique, are you on mute, or the floor is yours?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Dominic Nyasulu from Malawi, National Coordinator for National Youth Network on Climate Change. Colleagues are very much appreciated for the information and the process, but also the work that involves the development of the report, alternative reports. I just wanted to have a general question for the two colleagues who gave their experience in terms of reporting. Us as a country, Malawi, I think through HTCR, it's a network of NGOs that are working on children's rights, that are being giving or developing alternative reports and focusing on the recommendations and also trying to provide some of the evidence around the issues, especially from generated from the government report. But I think my two issues that I wanted to find out are that, number one, last year I think the UN Convention on the Right of the Children, I think they released a general call, I think number 26, for actually stakeholders to provide input in terms of how a government can be actually guided in terms of reporting climate change issues as one of rising issues. So I just wanted to find out in terms of the mechanism that are being used currently in absence of that guidelines, then how our colleagues, what instrument or mechanism are being used to making sure that they are guided as such, specifically on climate change, understanding that currently there isn't a clear guidelines in terms of how states can be guided in terms of reporting on climate change. Secondly, is on child-led activities in your perspective, in your country level. I want to understand in terms of the data, do you have a credible data that you can rely on at country level that can be incorporated when reporting? Normally for us, we normally find it very difficult to generate locally kind of a data that could inform our reporting. Just finally, is also to be happy that us as a network, we are leading a section specifically that is looking at children, climate change and environment under the umbrella of the organization that is also coordinating the alternative report that is under the subject matter that we are discussing. So it is a bit very difficult, especially when it comes to data generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dominique. Maybe I don't, Iriasu, can you comment just to say, Dominique, the Côte d'Ivoire office has been part also of the consultations on the General Comment 26. So they have been involved on the children's consultations and adults consultations as well. But just I will let Iriasu respond to your question regarding that. Iriasu, tu peux répondre sur la question que Laure t'a juste mis dans le chat, s'il te plaît. Merci beaucoup.
Je n'ai pas vu la question de En fait, je suis sur la transcription, donc je n'ai pas...
La question, oui, pardon. Alors, la question, c'est comment est-ce que...
De l'or.
Oui, la question, c'est le commentaire général numéro 26 en cours n'a pas encore de guidance. Et donc, on aimerait savoir quels outils vous avez utilisés pour guider et préparer votre rapport. Et l'autre point, donc la première question, c'est quels ont été les outils que vous avez utilisés pour guider et préparer votre rapport en matière voilà, de changement climatique. Et l'autre question, c'était par rapport aux données. Et ça, c'est plus relatif, je dirais, au rapport aussi du Forum des ONG, c'est quelles ont été les données climatiques ou de protection de l'environnement que vous avez pu utiliser, puisque Dominique expliquait que ces données sont parfois très difficiles à avoir, voire pas forcément, voilà, il n'y a pas forcément de possibilité des données crédibles ne sont pas forcément disponibles. Et donc, il était curieux aussi de savoir quelles étaient les données que vous aviez utilisées. Voilà, je te laisse répondre, Iriassou.
Ok, bien sûr, merci beaucoup. En fait, merci pour la traduction. J'avais compris la question de Dominique, mais c'est la question de l'or, comme j'ai dit, je n'ai pas la chat box en face de moi, je suis dans la transcription que je n'avais pas vue. Alors, pour revenir aux outils, j'ai déjà parlé de l'outil série qui a été mis à notre disposition, qui nous a permis de vraiment avoir matière à regarder tout ce qui concerne les questions environnementales et de changement climatique. Aussi, la fiabilité des données qu'on a utilisées ou bien qu'on a dans une large mesure, et pas seulement sur l'aspect climatique dans ce rapport, mais sur tout ce qui a été présenté comme information dans ce rapport. Alors, il y a des rapports d'études, des rapports sur la situation des droits de l'homme, des droits de l'enfant qui existent, qu'on a utilisés, mais il y a aussi que dans notre contexte, on a en place un mécanisme d'information sur les violations des droits de l'enfant piloté par la société civile. Ce mécanisme-là existe et il est régulièrement alimenté en termes d'information, en termes de données par l'ensemble des organisations de la société civile impliquées dans ce mécanisme-là. Et je vous l'avais dit, le Forum des ONG qui a piloté le rapport est une fêtière qui a en son sein environ une cinquantaine d'organisations réparties sur l'ensemble du territoire. Et donc, ces organisations-là alimentent régulièrement à travers ce mécanisme la base de données du forum. Et c'est des éléments, c'est des informations tout à fait vérifiables et fiables qui peuvent être utilisées pour développer des plans de plaidoyer ou bien pour initier s'initier des choses, développer des rapports de ce genre. Il y a aussi que en Côte d'Ivoire, le gouvernement a aussi son mécanisme et des informations sont régulièrement partagées sur la situation de l'homme et des droits de l'enfant. Mais sur les questions environnementales, oui, c'est clair que il y a des défis sur le fait de disposer de données, mais on a quand même un bon engagement du gouvernement au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire sur cette question-là. Je rappelle qu'il a été organisé il n'y a pas longtemps la COP27 en Côte d'Ivoire, la COP15, pardon, ce qui est une preuve de l'engagement du gouvernement de Côte d'Ivoire sur cette question. Donc, on a quand même quelques données qui existent qu'on a pu trouver, mais mieux, on a avec nous sur ce programme-là, je vous ai dit que tout ça a été soutenu par le programme SIDA en Côte d'Ivoire. On a sur ce programme-là un partenaire qu'on appelle FERIAD, qui est également une fêtière d'organisations travaillant dans le secteur de l'environnement et du changement climatique. Je pense que c'est une fêtière d'une trentaine d'organisations. Et cette fêtière-là, parce qu'elle travaille dans ce domaine, a mis à disposition l'équipe, des équipes qui ont travaillé sur ces rapports-là, énormément d'informations, énormément de données, énormément de rapports sur la situation, mais également, parce que ça aussi, c'est des éléments qui peuvent être étudiés dans le cadre de ces processus, également des éléments factuels, parce qu'il y a des éléments factuels qui peuvent être constatés et qui peuvent également être justifiés dans le cadre de ces processus de rapportage. Alors, j'avais entendu dans la première partie de la question, les mécanismes, comment on s'assure de disposer de mécanismes pour suivre tout ça, comment on s'assure même concernant le commentaire général V6, comment on s'assure d'avoir une bonne visibilité sur l'utilisation de tous ces éléments, comment on s'assure d'assurer une bonne coordination de tous ces éléments. Alors, l'une des bonnes choses qu'on a ici en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est que depuis quelques années, on va dire depuis 5 ans, parce que ça a été fait sur l'ancien cycle programmatique, la société civile que le Bureau pays de Save Children soutient a pu, notamment le Forum des ONG, a pu amener les acteurs du gouvernement à créer avec lui ce qu'on appelait le cadre permanent pour le suivi des droits de l'enfant en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, il y a un cadre permanent qui existe, cadre au sein duquel la société civile, y compris les organisations d'enfants et des représentants du gouvernement s'asseyent et discutent de tout ce qui concerne les droits de l'enfant, tout ce qui concerne les mécanismes CDE, EPU, KDB en matière de droits de l'enfant. Et c'est un cadre qui marche et qui permet de discuter de toutes ces questions, y compris les questions environnementales et notamment l'observation générale 26 dont vous avez parlé et qui aussi fait l'objet de discussions et de comment cela va être mis en œuvre ou intégré. Alors, il faut aussi rappeler que la Côte d'Ivoire va participer en 2024 au processus, au cycle C2. Ça, il va présenter un rapport pour la C2. Donc, c'est des questions qui sont discutées dès maintenant et qui pourraient être au moment venu intégrées dans les rapports qui seront fournis au moment indiqué, donc permettre d'avoir des recommandations qui pourraient permettre d'aller de l'avant sur ces questions. Alors, j'espère avoir donné des réponses satisfaisantes. Et comme je l'ai dit, je n'ai pas vu la question, je ne suis pas dans la chat. De lors, si Thérèse, tu peux rapidement je vais retourner dans la chat en quittant dans... Voilà.
Oui, je vais répondre, je vais traduire aussi. So I just going to summarize very quickly because we need to we still have another topic to go on. So just to say, so Yesu was sharing the fact that Kony, yes, there was also a national alliance on that was part of the elaboration of the civil society reports. So there was a connection between environmental organizations and child rights organizations, and they were basically working with the PERIAD, which is a national alliance of environmental organizations that were part of the process. Regarding the follow-up and the implementations of the recommendations, there is actually in Ivory Coast a national framework, a national committee that is existing for the follow-up of treaty bodies recommendations, mechanism recommendations. And Save the Children obviously is part of it, and is and also our partners, the National Coalition of Child Rights Forum des ONG. And this committee is in charge of the follow-up of various recommendations, but not only, there is also this is also a forum for discussing trends, topics like the General Comment 26 and elaboration. So it's there are a few spaces currently available where we can ensure continuity and monitoring of our work on reporting. So I know that we are a little bit delayed, so maybe we can go further. If there is any additional questions, please, do not hesitate to put it in the chat, and we will be responding later to all of you. I hope that at least we have a starting point. We have been able to respond to some of the main questions. I'm going to pass the floor now again to Laure, and this is a quite good transition with what you just asked on the. We're going to go to the right side of our table and now working on speaking a little bit about experiences regarding the follow-up to recommendations on climate change and environment. So please, the floor is yours, Laure.
Thank you so much, Teresa and Iriasu and Ange and our colleagues. I know that we were not able to hear from I forget always names. I'm so bad at this. Sorry about that. Agim, I think, from Albania, but he needed to leave the call. So I'm sure that our colleagues could share more about the experience and answer these questions if they are here in the chat box. But otherwise, we could also share some information for those who want. I just saw that we have 1 minute break because we're a bit late, but just 1 minute break, just stretch a bit because we will go into the almost last part of this community of practice session. I'm really happy about the question about General Comment 26. So Connie will say a word about that in the end. So yes, stay tuned. So 1 minute at 8 past, I will start with with this part 3 about follow-up to UN and regional climate environment recommendations. Thank you so much. So slowly starting back. Sorry for a very, very short break, but I hope you're still all excited to hear about this last part, almost. As we talked earlier, the reporting process to the UN and regional human rights monitoring and review mechanisms, where states send reports on a regular basis on how well they're implementing their conventions, these commitments that they do for children's rights. We mentioned earlier that we as civil society and children have an opportunity to bring information to that process, so that those independent bodies, but also the peers, when states are reviewing states, like in the Universal Periodic Review process, they have all the information that's there that they need to know on how is the state doing on climate change and environment impacts on children. Are they doing enough, and what's missing? So those perspectives, we can bring them up in those reports and these contributions, like our colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and from Albania have shown. So that's really an important role to play. And often we start there. We're super happy. Yes, we brought it in our alternative report. And then super happy that there's recommendations on the issue, but then there's very little in general on all topics done on these recommendations that come out of these processes. So now I'm just going to talk with the help of colleagues from Zambia and from the Philippines. What can we do in terms of follow-up and use of these recommendations that come out? So the right side of this cycle. And there is a tool that was developed under the How to Child Rights series that helps to get tips and tricks. How can you do follow-up? Besides just disseminating these recommendations, what else can you do? So these are some tips and tricks you can find there and that you can contribute to. So please use this tool and give us feedback and ideas how it can be better. I wanted to show, but I will not have time today, but you will get this presentation. How can you find the recommendations that relate to climate and environment that are relevant to your country? If you go, I will suggest you go to this one in yellow, which is called the Universal Human Rights Index. You type the name of your country and you select, you can type words like climate or environment, and you will find all the relevant recommendations that came to your country in the last couple of years. It's wonderful database, and it's so easy to find. And that's really something I recommend you to check out. I will now invite Hermes from Zambia to share with us what follow-up actions to the Universal Periodic Review process and to the CRC committee recommendations, the concluding observations that you got recently in May that relate to climate change and environment. Hermes, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Over. Thank you for the opportunity to just share what we are doing. I will switch off the camera. I just wanted to make sure people know I'm here. So I'll be very quick because of time. So basically for us, we actually admit that what's been happening is that we make these reports, submit them, enjoy the scrutiny when it's time for sessions, but then we notice that after we are back home, everyone else goes back to ordinary lives and forget. So what we have done in the immediate is that, for example, in our CEDA CSO mandatory perspective and with regards to climate change, we've ensured that as we are planning with partners, they are ensuring that their planning is based and also guided by specific recommendations that came from UPR, and we made a strong submission for CRC as well. So we want to make sure that we don't just have our partners or ourselves develop interventions that are void of these recommendations. So we keep integrating them in the process like that. What that does is that every time we're having advocacy work around climate change, we are reminding the state and duty bearers around the submissions and the recommendations that we made to these mechanisms. So that's the first tier. The second tier we've noticed for Zambia, because like the colleagues from Ivory Coast were sharing, we also developed a committee with the ministry, then the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Child Development, which has now transitioned that department to community development. But what we did is we developed what we called concluding observations and recommendations committee that we supported. It sits between, it's interministerial, but it's got the presence of critical CSOs and NGOs in there. And what that does is that we monitor the implementation or the reactions that we have to the concluding observations, either be it from the UNCRC or the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So what that does is that it keeps reminding us more often to ensure that these are not just recommendations that were done, but we work towards ensuring that in the next submission of the report, we don't have a good number of those cases that prompted the recommendations to come. So for Zambia, basically, that's one of the things that we do. Now we are working to influence the Ministry of Green Economy here in Zambia to come up with a climate change specific recommendation framework. This one is similar to the one I just referred to, where we follow up. We have a committee, we have individuals that do that, but we want to influence government now to have a framework within the Ministry of Green Economy that will specifically speak to recommendations that we have come from the UPR session. For example, we have a few from 2017 that are still standing, and purely because there's no one paying particular attention to that. For example, we had one that talked about, protecting human rights and the environment in mining areas. For example, in Central Province here in Zambia, we've got what we call lead poisoning that has been very devastating on the growth of children, both mentally and just physically, because of the pollution that has come in that mining area. And there was a specific recommendation to deal with that. But because there is no committee within the Zambia management, environmental management, and the Ministry of Community, the Ministry of Green Economy, we tend to relax until the next session comes. So what we're doing now is that we are influencing government to have a framework where we'll cluster all of these climate and environment sensitive recommendations and then follow them up. So that's another thing that we currently are doing. The other one I would like to add as well, because of time, is that now the Ministry of Green Economy again is coming up with what we are calling the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan. The objective of this plan is basically to integrate adaptation into new and existing policies and programs, and also respond to issues like recommendations, and also develop strategies on how we respond to long-term impact or effects of climate change. So currently we are working with one of our partners, Care for Nature Zambia, who are also part of the team developing this national adaptation plan to ensure that in the strategies that are being created, for example, to deal with climate change and all of these policies, one of them would be specifically speaking to investments in terms of responding to to addressing recommendations. So yeah, basically I think my time is up, so let me end there, unless if there are any questions. But I would also like to comment lastly that you could also engage permanent missions subscribes to these mechanisms to follow up, provide advocacy brief, and then you can engage using your local embassies to follow up. Thank you, and over to you. Sorry for going over time.
No worries, Hermes. Thank you so very much, because it's very concrete things you're doing with the recommendations, and that you're suggesting to colleagues to do, engaging with missions on the recommendations on climate and environment. I mean, some missions may be more interested than others, and that's really a great tip, since they have an open door to the government. And all these initiatives that you spoke about, National Climate Change Adaptation Plan, etc. Sorry to be so short like that, and I wish we had more time, but we had to cover a lot of things today, since we are trying to cover both the climate environment background and the child rights reporting and follow up. So thank you so much. I will now, I will encourage all of you who have questions to please type in the chat box, because I think we will not have so much time to take live questions, and we will try to, I encourage you also, Hermes, and all the speakers who spoke before, to look at the chat box to see if there are any questions you could also answer. And now I would like to give the floor to Rexel Abrigo, our colleague from the Philippines. Rex, you're environmental health advisor, and you wanted to share with us some reflections about the recent recommendations that Philippines have received from the UNCRC and the UPR, correct?
Yes. Hi, good evening.
Over to you. Good
I'm
evening.
good evening to everyone. I'm Rex, excuse me, Abrigo. I'm the environmental health advisor and climate change advisor of SIMP, the Children Philippines. Yes, you're right. I was asked to share our experience in developing our, first of all, our environmental and climate change strategy. I just wanted to quickly point out that Save the Children Philippines is still developing our environmental and climate change strategy. Again, because of the interest of time, I am a little bit adopting my, I have a presentation already in place, but maybe I can just focus on one very specific observation or recommendation that I can share to the group in developing our climate change strategy or policy that I think had a very big impact in terms of how Save the Children Philippines is able to address most of the observations that are found in the CRC report. Okay, good. Can I share some slides so that it would be easier for me?
Absolutely, please do. Just take over
So,
the presentation.
yeah. Oh, where is it? Oops. Sorry. Share. There. Can you see it now? Can you see it now?
Yes.
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 Yes, Rex.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly run through this presentation that I prepared to get to my point. In developing their policies, of course, in every policy development initiative that every organization goes through, we look at all the policies and all the we do a lot of consultations, we do a lot of research, and we have gone through all of those processes in developing our strategy. We also consulted a lot of people from the international network of Save the Children, and it has informed our policy. But what I want to share right now is that since we're still developing our strategy, and I recently reviewed the CRC observations for the Philippines, what I found out is that what is very effective in developing this our strategies, that when we dissect children's risk, the risk of climate change to children, and cross-refer it to all the rights that children that we have, as mentioned in the convention, I think it was very it resulted to activities. Even though we haven't seen the CRC observations before we developed the strategy, there are a lot of overlaps, and there are a lot of recommendations that were already addressed. This, I think, happened mainly because of the approach that we did in developing our policy. We didn't just settle for, in developing the policy, we didn't just settle for mentioning children's rights, mentioning climate change risk, addressing risk. We didn't settle for that. What we did is we tried to dissect what the risks are, and using the globally accepted framework on risk management. We looked at we dig deeper to the vulnerability of children, and within the vulnerability context, we looked at the adaptive capacities, sensitivity of all children groups. And we also looked at the hazards and the exposure of of the children here in the Philippines. And for exposure, we dissected it further to look at the intensity, and then all the climate parameters that we have. So I'll just keep on this part, and share to everybody. Um, Given the approach that we had, I saw several SCP activities in our strategy that already address some of the recommendations and observations in the UNCRC report. For instance, in the section of best interests of the child, in item number 15, it says a lot. It says about we have to integrate and consistently interpret and apply the rights of a child to have his or her best interest taken as a primary consideration in all these policies and programs and projects concerning children. SCP already have, based on our currently developing strategy, we already tried engaging the Climate Change Commission of the Philippines, and together with them, we have created a technical working group very specific for children. And to get with Climate Change Commission, we co-designed this technical working group to involve children. So my point here is that even if we haven't really seen the observation yet, this activity is already identified in our strategy, which overlaps to this one, and we will be very happy to continue this further. Um, uh, moving along, in developing and implementing procedures, still in the best interest of the child, um, we have already been embarking, together with the Climate Change Commission, the development of a climate risk screening tool, and sort of a cost-effective methodology for assessing the vulnerability specific to children in schools and communities, especially in the underserved areas. What do we mean by this? Uh, there's a lot of report already. It was mentioned even a while ago that children would be facing like heat waves, more flooding, and all these things. But in terms of developing sort of an action plan to address all this risk, the Philippines, our methods is to develop what we call the local climate change adaptation plan. And this local climate change adaptation plan is very specific to the municipality or the town level. The problem that we have been facing since I guess since time immemorial, when we took this challenge and when we understand what climate change crisis is, um, we are not successful in developing local climate change adaptation plans, especially in addressing the risk to children, because we are not able to identify what are the specific vulnerabilities, what are the adaptive capacities that we have to strengthen in terms of the children that are in certain area. Because in the Philippines, we are very diverse in terms of biophysical, geographic diversity is very, very evident here in the Philippines. So it's very important for us to look at the local context. So that's why we are doing this with the Climate Change Commission, and it already addressed this sort of observation. Another one that I wanted to share with the group is that in terms of rights to life, survival, and development, it says the observation says that the committee extremely concerned about grave violations against children, such as killing, maiming, and recruitment and use of children by armed forces and armed groups. Here in the Philippines, just to give a very brief background, there's in the southern portion of the Philippines, there's an area or a region there that has been under sort of armed conflict for decades now, and the problem there is that and we call that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, in Muslim Mindanao rather. So what SCP have been doing even before we saw the observations from CRC is that we are already trying to engage them and develop a sort of a project with them to reintegrate the combatant groups of this militant groups and try to use sustainable livelihood programs as a platform to reach out to them. And by doing so, the BAR Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources and Energy was very eager to work with us and to establish this sustainable livelihood program. Primarily because when the MILF groups heard about this, they are also very eager to engage on this endeavor, and but this has been a very good avenue for us to understand what they want, and what they want is for their children to not go through the same process of being recruited in the armed forces and engaging in all these things. So it's a very good peace building program for them. And probably one. Do I have time for one or two more slides?
No, Rex, I'm so sorry. I'm so
Also,
sorry. I'm
okay,
afraid
okay.
some people will be leaving, but I really
Yeah,
find it's
anyway, yeah.
amazing. I really find it's amazing
Mhm.
that you have so detailed analysis of the recommendations that the Philippines received and how you're actually acting on each of them in different ways. And this last slide was also eye-opening because it relates to children involved in the conflict. And that's really interesting to make the link with environment and climate policies. And yeah, so I'm sorry, Rex, I hope, unless you wanted to say a last word, because it's the time to close the meeting, I just wanted to give a floor to someone else just to say a word. Would you mind sharing your slides so that we can include them in the main presentation that we can share? Would that be okay for you to do that?
Definitely, of course. So it's unfortunate that we don't have time, but what I wanted to share is that we have to dissect the issues on climate change to be able to provide a good adaptation action for children. That's my
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And Rex, you know, this is I mean, for me, I really want to talk more with you. So, and I'm sure many will. So let's look into that as a community of practice, and with Hermes as well, like to see, you know, what is being done and what are the tips and tricks you have, you know, based on your work that can help others. So it's to be continued, I will say. And just before closing,
I was so eager to share. Sorry, I forgot the time.
No worries. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. I just wanted to close to give the floor to Connie, because you will get more information about the general comment 26 that's being developed. But Connie, you will just say a word about what you will get and what's going on without going in details, because I think, Connie, you will organize also webinars about this with more information, right?
I see it's 2:30 and I don't want anybody to leave, to drop out before I just take 30 seconds to say this, and it's all related to what you have presented. Just give me a sign that you can hear me well.
We hear you well, Connie.
Yes, we hear you.
So, okay,
Thank
so
you.
very quickly, just to say that because of all the efforts you are doing, children like Agim are doing, and the big advocacy and push, the committee decided to do a general comment on child rights and environment, focusing on climate change, and the first draft of the general comment was released in November, and the comments are open until the 15th of February. So well, I don't have to explain to you how, I think you know best how important this would be for the whole process and to make governments accountable to the CRC through the reporting process. Now, we don't have time to get into the details. There are lots of very, very challenging issues. Well, if you go down on the comments, Laura, but you will, I'm sure you'll distribute the slides, and I will send an email around to call on your comments. But just to say that just in this call, 40-something people, there is more expertise here on child rights and environment than in the committee itself. And I'm not kidding. The committee has very little, only a couple of members are aware of some of these issues, but not all of them. They need us, especially people like you who are hands-on on the reporting process, and you know what you need to be able to make the government accountable. So I would really appreciate it if you contribute to the consultations process. I will share with all of you the email that I will be sending around to launch the comments. My colleague Karen Pilgrim here and myself will collect all these comments and send them to the committee. They need us. They need us to make this general comment good, because this general comment is going to be the benchmark for what governments have to do in terms of environment. So it is really important. It is a piece of international law that gives teeth to the UN system to push governments into being respectful of the environment and therefore respectful of child rights. And the last point that I want to say is the issue about policy coherence that Laura mentioned in the at the beginning. You're in the field and you see things so differently. You know that there are no silos. Here in Geneva, people always fight for the turf, and they tend to put human rights versus environment. So it is very important that we give the message that by complying to environmental obligations, we are helping on the fulfillment of child rights. But these are the type of messages that I know you will understand, and that I would be very valuable to get from you for this round of comments. I will be in touch by email, and you can vous pouvez me poser des questions en français ou en español si lo necesitan. Je suis à votre disposition. Muchas gracias. I think I did as fast as I could.
Thank you so much. Wow. What a quick one. Very clear.
It was like an ad.
Thank you so much, and thank you all who stayed on for until now. And so all of this is to be continued. It's really an area of work. I can say we can do a lot of change if we, one, report more, work together across the child rights, human rights organizations, and the environmental and climate ones, that we work more together on this, reporting more and providing input to the general comment. It will on climate change and environment. So, and how they impact children. So it's all to be continued, I think. Thank you all for today, and thank you for staying on a bit longer. And Connie, you can type your email if you want people to ask you questions. You can type on the chat box, so they will have it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Bye.
جزيلا جدا.
Bye.